What's up? What's up? What's up, everybody? This is Pastor G, and today we are having a marathon on community conversations today. I am so excited that we have been able to put together a great list of community leaders, servant leaders, urban servant leaders, civic leaders in our community. As you can see, we've already spoken to Reverend Richard Bray, attorney Roderick Bohannon, and we also slid in Brother James Wilson, who is doing some great work over there on the near east side town of Indianapolis. He's going to continue to share with us throughout the day what's going on in the streets. So we thank God for him. But right now, we want to bring in another great friend of ours who is doing great work with the concerned clergy. Here he is, Pastor Greene. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Pastor Gurdon. Good to see you on today.
Good to be seen, and my grandmama said, and to know it, right? Good to be seen and to know it, as they always say. Hey, you know, we really want to jump into this real quick because, of course, we got a lot going on in our community, and certainly one of the reasons why we're having community conversation is because we do need to talk about not only what has been happening on the national and if not international stage. We got some things we need to deal with right here at home. And I have instructed and led people to our website, uniteforchange.org, where we have a list of some 49 demands or agenda items from various organizations here locally. And we want to know what the concerned clergy is doing, what they're thinking, how you're collaborating, what are we doing in the city with regard to the faith community in this moment where there is so much change happening at neck break speed. What are we doing?
What we're focusing on as the concerned clergy is to make sure that we get action. While we clearly we have the ears of people now who want to listen, that typically may not have always listened, but we want to drive that to action. It is so important that we get decision makers to really do something and not get caught up in just talking about it. And then we wake up a few weeks from now and we've gone back to sleep here in Indianapolis. We have to drive some changes. I still believe they won't happen unless we're very intentional. We have to be committed to driving change in areas of economics, in areas of education, in areas of public safety, in areas of health. All of those areas are important, and they're a focus for the concerned clergy.
Okay, so basically what you have just described is you've described what I think I hear a lot of people talking about, and that is that what happened with Eric Garner is not just about community police relations. There is a system at work here that devalues our community, and it sounds like the agenda isn't just about, in this moment, isn't just about pushing through guidelines on putting knees in necks or chokeholds. It sounds like there's a bigger agenda here. Am I correct? If so, expand on that.
Well, definitely, we have to change culture. I mean, it's not about trying to get the detail on a chokehold, et cetera. It's about changing culture. You have to keep in mind that we in Indianapolis have said our officers have gone through cultural training. But yet, in the Deshaun Reed situation, an officer says, hey, this is going to be a closed casket. And that officer has 15 years on the job. Well, clearly, he's gone through the diversity training, but he wasn't very sensitive. And a lot of that's driven because we've not created a different culture. We got to change the culture, and that means we have to have things in place that will help drive that change in culture. So, for example, we have to be able to have access to the FOP contract to make sure that, hey, we're being policed the way we want to be policed. As long as the police are protected, well, then they'll keep, it may not be a chokehold. It may be something else that takes place. And we don't have time to chase these items down one by one. We need to change culture, and that's extremely important, and we need to get it done now.
And I would assume, we talk about the arc of justice. I would assume that these are not themes, issues, items that are going to happen overnight. And let's be clear, a lot is happening real quick in our country. Minneapolis has had to make some drastic changes real quick. Obama, the 8 can't wait, pushing legislation through or policies through our mayor's offices throughout the country. Yet there are some issues that it sounds like are going to take patience, and more than patience, they're going to take strategy and they're also going to take people who are willing to stay in this conversation over the long haul. What is the concerned clergy doing? And don't get me wrong, I know I'm asking this question knowing that we were there. You know, we've been in these conversations long before Sean Reed, long before George Floyd, long before anyone else. But I do think that there are some people who feel like if a pastor is not marching, they're doing nothing. If clergy is not protesting, then they're not doing anything. What does it take from the faith community to make sure we're in it for the long haul?
Well, clearly, first of all, we want to make sure we understand that the clergy is all committed. I mean, I have been actively engaged with discussions with CEOs here locally in Indianapolis, the Indianapolis Chamber, and other business leaders that are key to making decisions to move the ball down the field. So while you may not see us at a specific march, it does not mean that we're not actively involved. Matter of fact, today at 5 o'clock, I'm going to be at a peace rally around what's going on in our community. So there's a number of clergy that are heavily involved. As a matter of fact, we've identified that next Sunday on Father's Day is Black Lives Matter Sunday. We're calling all of our faith-based community to, if they can get their members to get a Black Lives Matter t-shirt, take a picture and post it on their social media in support of Black Lives Matter and this entire movement. Not only just wear the shirt, we're encouraging people to get their t-shirt from a Black-owned business, We know you can go to Walmart, but help support a Black-owned business, communicate an economic message, support our own people, and support this cause. And so we have several churches that have already said, hey, I'm in. We understand that this violence has not just impacted African-American males, but the largest percentage have. And so we're using Father's Day to communicate that message, to be unified, and to say, hey, to maybe some of our senior saints who were part of movements with the civil rights who can't get out, but they can get a t-shirt. They can wear that t-shirt, get their picture taken, and say, I'm supporting this movement. Because we got to do this together.
All right, so I want to make sure that I gain access to the information to share as much as I can with our community about that Black Lives Matter Sunday. Not only that, I want to, knowing me, I'm going to probably get a shirt and I'm going to show up at a bunch of white churches. I'm just throwing it out for free. And challenging some of our white brothers and sisters who are say that they're Christians and make sure that they're representing as well. That may hurt, but this is not a problem. Black Lives Matter isn't a problem for Black lives. We already knew that. It seemed like that's a problem for the broader community, and I think it's important for us to challenge the narrative that all lives matter and that exclude Black lives all of a sudden. So make sure that, if you don't mind, send us that information. We can share it so I can get my shirt, so we can share the vendors on our website. And unfortunately, I got to cut this one short. I want to talk to you some more, but we've got the candidate running for governor, Brother Woody Myers, who is sitting in the green room right now, and we got to get him on. So we're going to go to him, and I know you don't mind that, but let's get you back on, man. I really thank you for this. Do you have any other information how people can get in touch with you?
Oh, the clergy, you can send me an email at clergynd@gmail.com, clergynd@gmail.com. And Pastor Gurdon, I'm going to tag you right now on Facebook and send you that information about the Black Lives Matter Sunday.
Wonderful. We thank you for that. I'm going to move on real quick. Y'all, we're going to do a 5-minute break. So y'all stick and stay tuned. I want you to share this broadcast because we have the next governor of the state of Indiana coming on. And I want y'all to make sure that you invite as many people as you can into this conversation, because we're talking about what's going on right now. How do we navigate this new normal and everything that's going on in our community? So y'all stick 5 minutes. I'll be right back. God bless. The ultimate goal of the Urban Servant Leadership Unconference, we want to be able to bring together as many pieces of the puzzle as we can so that ultimately we put together a picture that helps us see and to understand what a valuable, sustainable community needs to look like.
I'm here because my personal life mission is to help others help themselves. It's the epitome of what servant leadership is all about.
So I wanted to come to the Unconference today so that I could discuss the Healthy Indiana Plan, which is a healthcare plan that's available to folks between the ages of 19 and 64 who have incomes at less than 138% of the federal poverty level.
My name is Anita Adams. I work with Indianapolis Healthy Star. We know that there are inequalities that are happening in our community, and we work to reduce those for families.
You have to be called to be a servant leader because you know that you are going to give and you may not get anything in return, and that's okay. An urban servant leader is called to do what we do.
You should really research it. If you were not here, I urge you, I cannot say this enough, that you need to come to the next conference.
All right, what's up, everybody? We are into part 2 of Community Conversations. I am so excited about what we've been learning today, what we've been hearing. Again, as I've shared earlier, we have had a marathon of interviews today from Reverend Richard Bray, Attorney Roderick Bohannon. We just heard from Reverend David Greene. We were waiting on Dr. Woody Myers, who is running he's a candidate for governor here in the state of Indiana. We're not sure if he's going to make it on or not, but we also have later on this afternoon Dee Ross with the Ross Foundation, and of course Rainn Wilson, who is with the Performing Arts Academy of Indiana Black Expo. So what we have done is we have reached out to some of our community activists from around the country, and we are now just on hold waiting for one person who honestly is just one of my I kind of feel like she's one of my children. She's like my daughter, okay? She really is like my daughter. And so I'm just waiting on her to come in. She is in Memphis, Tennessee. She is an activist from Memphis, Tennessee. That means that whenever there is something that is going on in the streets of Memphis, you can count on this young lady being front and center. And so we have had several conversations about it. So I want to bring her into the conversation so that we can hear from another person who's in this fight for justice in this country. So let's see if we can get her in here. Are you there? There she is. Theryn Bond, all the way from Memphis, Tennessee. Sister Theryn, how you doing?
Hey.
Hey. All right, so here's the deal. Everybody doesn't know our relationship, and so I'm not going to say it. I'm going to let you talk about how we know each other very briefly. And then I want to talk, get real serious here and talk about not only what's going on in this country, but some of the things that you're seeing down there in Memphis, Tennessee. First, about who you are, who we are to each other, and then let's get into some serious business. Go ahead.
Oh, wow. So we're family. I think there's a mentorship and there's a family component. We probably butt heads the first time we met each other real hard. It's so different now. I think, going through growing pains, now we really understand each other on so many different levels, and everybody needs somebody like that. So it goes way back to, 2005, 2006, somewhere in there. So that's how he and I know each other. And what else do I do? I'm on the front lines for a lot of things with a lot of other really awesome folks here in Memphis. And so navigating that, we go through, emotional trauma, physical trauma, mental trauma. So there are a lot of things that we have to do to make sure our communities are taken care of, which means things are hard on us, but it's all in an effort to make things better for generations to come.
Wonderful. Now, Theryn was one of my students at Tennessee State University in Nashville, Tennessee. She was one of the crew, the Room 114 crew. Y'all don't know nothing about that, but when I say 114, she knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But I do want to bring this up because you mentioned this at one point that there have been a lot of the students who have come out of the class that you were in and maybe one after you, maybe a couple before you, who seem to have found a role or a lane in community service throughout the country. We got one that ran for city county council in Louisville, Kentucky. We had another, Aaron McGee, who ran for the school board in Nashville, Tennessee. You also ran for council, am I correct, in Memphis, Tennessee?
Last year, yes.
Yep, you ran for a seat there. And so what do you think is going on with your generation and public service where we see a sort of a bubbling up of individuals taking on leadership positions?
So I think my particular generation, millennials, are those who have really good relationships with some of our more senior generation. And we've done the work to maintain relationships with generations coming behind us, which is really important. And it's done in a way that we haven't seen before. Obviously, there are digital components that keep us connected, like Facebook, Skype, Zoom conference calls, Instagram, things like that. And these are also ways in which we get our news and so expediently, right? And so we have decided as a generation, we will not be moved. We are a very strong headstrong generation. And so because of that, we don't just take things lying down. If we see there's a problem, we are going to want to find a solution. We're not going to wait on anybody else to give us that. We're going to demand answers. And so generations before us, it's not that they didn't do that. It's just, it was more of a be patient in due time. And millennials are saying, the time is now, it's past due. Any time is a good time for us to make some change and offer some solutions. And so we're stepping up in ways that we never thought we would. We're filling in gaps that we didn't necessarily want to do, but it was necessary to have happen.
And so, as you say that, you mentioned a minute ago that you have a connection to people like myself, to your father. Some people haven't made the connection between Theryn Bond and the Bond family, and so clearly you have a lineage, you have a DNA that gives you access to what I would argue would be some very wise individuals. Has that been beneficial to you as an activist, or how have you perceived your access to people who sort of came before you in that, as you call it, patient generation? What has that benefited you?
It's definitely checks and balances. It's definitely, the conversations have to happen to understand how things were processed before and then how things are being processed now. What worked then may not work now, but it's nice to understand the foundation that was set that we can expand upon, right? And so there may be things that work. Sometimes now people don't want to have the conversations, and it's important to start with the conversation even before an action takes place, because otherwise we're just, acting out of not even instinct, but out of just rage. And while there are many things to be enraged about, it's important to know what that's rooted in. That way we know which way we need to, grow or change, amend or adapt. And the most important thing is to make sure that our generations that are more senior than myself listen. And sometimes that's what doesn't happen. And I make it my personal business to say, hey, this is exactly how I feel as a millennial. Do you understand that? If not, how can I help you understand? Then how can I translate that to how I feel as a millennial? Then also generations that come behind me. We've really got to connect the dots. And sometimes that's what's missing, are those conversations between more senior generations and younger generations, because they assume younger generations are lazy. They don't care. They don't listen. And now we're seeing most of the people that are in the streets right now are my age or even younger. And so it lets us know as a country that when there are things the younger generation is passionate about, they will step up and show out in full force. And so let's continue to have those conversations and give them something to be passionate about. Give them a reason to share their voices more and more, and show the world that, we can be unified in some ways when we really care.
So the obvious question I'm going to ask, because of course, I've talked to you about the unconference that's coming up, and part of the conversation that we're trying to have is, once we get beyond the marching, once we get beyond, and don't get me wrong, everybody knows that SNCC, which really was launched out of the basement of American Baptist College in Nashville, Tennessee, was just that. It was a group of students, right? We understand that D-Day was students. We understand that Double D-Day was students. So we do understand that young people historically have led. Many of those who are in the older generation were the ones who were marching back then. They were the ones being arrested back then. They were the ones who were doing the things that were agitating the status quo back then. So this is not new, but I do have to ask the obvious question, which is, what is the millennial, there's all these other different titles for this, your generation. How are you all going to transition that energy once we're beyond the marches to actually getting into the other aspects, which is not agitation, but it's things like legislation? Like, what are we going to do post? Are we going to vote? Are we going to register? Are we going to vote? Because there is a movement amongst my daughter's generation, she's 21, that says voting doesn't work. Voting doesn't matter. And you've seen the numbers, right? I'm talking about in swing states. We had the numbers to carry elections in swing states, and people just didn't vote. So what are we going to do? How do we transition from the streets to, the other work that needs to happen? I'm just curious.
So there's a couple different things, and it's important to create the pipeline from protest to polls to policy. It's 3 Ps. I've probably said it maybe 100 times in the last couple of days. And there are those who want to march, and that's great, and it's necessary, and it needs to continue to happen. We also have to understand that the reason we are protesting and marching and having these rallies is because there are policies in place that don't serve us. So we have to understand what those policies are, what changes we need to make, and how those things take place. So the way you change policy is by someone in an elected office drafting a resolution, an ordinance, legislation to say, this is going to be a policy change, a policy amendment, an entirely new policy. And that happens by voting. So it happens when the people that are marching decide they're going to cast a ballot to put a person in elected office so that they can enact legislation that will serve us. A lot of people want things microwave, and I get it, we want things instantly because we've waited so long to see some things change. And that's rightfully so, right? The thing is, some things, and I hate to say that some things take time, but this has been the biggest push in our nation's history for something to change. Like, we have never seen all walks of life, financial backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, socioeconomic. We've never seen anything like this. And so now you've got the Black Lives Matter movement just taking the nation by storm. It's been around. We've seen things. We've discussed them. But now, we've got white support. Now we're getting corporate support. And these are things that we've had to fight for a long time. And so while people say their vote doesn't count, it does. Sometimes one vote is the vote that will change the trajectory of an election, of a city, of a state, of an entire country. On a federal level, we need to do away with the Electoral College. It needs to be by popular vote. We've seen how in past elections where the person who has gotten the popular vote didn't win, but popular vote means popular. They were the most liked or voted for candidate, and that's who, in essence, should win the election. It shouldn't be decided by a select, affluent group of seemingly knowledgeable folks that guide this country, but then when Black and brown folks need help or legislation, they're nowhere to be found to help be a part of that process. And so for folks that say voting doesn't count, it does. You just might not see it right away. But if you vote this time and the next time and the next time, it's a continuous thing. And it's all about consistency. It's all about whatever process we start, we have to see it all the way through and continue to push. We have to continue to make demands and apply pressure and stop dollars from moving. The black dollar is the most coveted dollar, but it is the least valued by people who can make those decisions. We know the value, they know the value, but they don't appreciate it. If we were to stop spending our dollars in certain places, there would be a lot of brands and companies that would go out of business. There would be no purpose for them anymore. And so when we realize the value in what our vote holds and our money holds, then we can begin to start making even bigger changes affecting on the corporate level, which in turn affects how, people get in office and policy. But it's got to be protest, policy, and going to the polls.
So what I hear you saying is that we need to respect the various roles that everyone has to play in the process, or that arc, what we call that arc of justice, requires multiple people playing multiple roles, right?
Absolutely.
And having said that, one of the things that at least I've heard throughout the day, we've had multiple interviews today, and one of the things that I've heard throughout the day, has been that of trying to make sure that we are communicating with each other in a way that respects the fact that I may not pray, I may not have money to give, I may not have the energy to march, but there's something that I can do. And when I do that thing, it has to be respected that this is the lane and the role that I play in that arc, right?
Yeah.
Because I tend to feel as though in processes or times or in seasons like this, that people feel like, well, where are the pastors? Well, where are the young people? Well, where are the seniors? Well, where's the money? Well, where is everybody at? As if to suggest, well, if you're not out here doing what I'm doing right now, then you're doing nothing.
So there's a role for everybody in this thing, but everybody needs to take a role. It's different if you say, I'm just going to watch and do absolutely nothing. That we cannot do. But there is a role for the person who wants to protest. There is a role for the person who just wants to donate. There is a role for the person who wants to, call their senator's office or write an email to their city council person or show up to a virtual town hall with their county commissioners and make a comment or ask a question. There is a role in this for everyone, but what we are asking people to do now is step up into whatever your role is and do it to the 10th power, however you see fit, because you may be scared to protest, and that's okay, but we need you to do something. We need you to do something that is beneficial to the lives of Black people, that will improve the lives of Black people, that will also improve what's going on, that will help to eliminate poverty, that will help to increase livable wages, that will help to make equitable access to education and healthcare. All these things have to come together, but if you are sitting and doing nothing, that is now the problem, is the do nothing. Because I can tell you, if you call me, if you email me, there is something I can find for you to do in this process. Mm-hmm. We can find something to accommodate those people who feel like there is no role. And then the B part of this is, while there are many religious and spiritual components to this, there are some people who don't believe. And this is not the time to alienate them because they don't connect to a particular faith. If they can realize that Black Lives Matter and they are not Jewish, or they are not Christian, or they are not Muslim, okay, well, we got you on, you understand Black Lives Matter, cool. Let's figure out how to incorporate them and find a way for them to plug into this.
And let's give it a C part and add this to it, that just because there are people who do have faith, that doesn't mean that they also should not be a part of the conversation. Because I did watch a group of millennials have a conversation in Chicago that was hosted by the African American Museum, the Smithsonian African American Museum in Washington, D.C. And in that conversation, it blew me away that there was someone who actually said that the church has no value in the conversation. And I thought that was the most, to me, it's like, I get your point, And don't get me wrong, nobody is perfect, and I'm not saying that anybody is all right or all wrong, but I think it goes both ways. Clearly, as a clergy, no matter how I dress, or no matter how I come at it, there are people that when they see Pastor G will literally walk the other way and not want to hear what I've got to say or feel like I shouldn't have a part of the conversation. And I think that it does that there are people in the church who have castrated other people who may not have faith, but then there are people who don't have faith who have actually castrated people in the church or people with faith. And so that goes both ways. We need to give grace on both ends of that conversation and stop bickering about that aspect so that all of us can move forward instead of being stalled in this, I don't like you because,
Yeah, it does have a place, and faith leaders do have a place. I think historically we have seen that power brokers and big time community stakeholders will say, well, let's run to the faith leaders first. And then oftentimes faith leaders guide the conversation. And they're not always out there at a protest, or they don't always donate unless they find something to connect it to, their church or their ministry. And so from my point of view, that's where I think that came from, is that, yes, we want them to be a part of the conversation, but we don't want them to guide the conversation. Yes, plug in, but why are they remaining the go-to every single time? Because the days are different where all churches, it used to be you could go to your church if you needed to pay your light bill, if your kids needed something to eat, if you needed help with a tutor. There are all these things that the church represented back in the day that are not the same now. And so people have an expectation of the church to say, well, don't just be here when somebody is reaching out, be there all the time. And so now some people are wanting to exclude them from conversation because they feel like they haven't been there, when communities need them at other times. And what I'm saying is we need everybody, but the conversation doesn't need to be guided or dictated by a body that some people feel has not always been there or created equitable space for everybody.
What everyone is getting right now is a behind the scenes look at Theryn and Pastor G's conversation on Twitter at 2:00 in the morning. Right.
Pretty much.
or text messages that we're getting each other, because I'm going to push back on that. Here's why I'm going to push back. Because here in Indianapolis, we got a lot going on because of George Floyd. Theryn was the first person, I want to be honest with y'all, I want to be clear. She was the first person that let me know what was going on in my city with regard to Sean Reed. Remember that? You reached out and asked me, what's going on? Right? Because you saw things happening, because you're plugged in and you see things happening in my city. Literally, someone got, the police shot an African-American male running away from them, literally 5 minutes away from my house. And Theryn has to call me from Memphis, Tennessee to tell me what's going on in my own community, because she's more plugged in to the Facebook and the Twitter feeds and all that. So she sees it and she informs me. So in the process of the conversation, here's my deal. We've got a lot going on. George Floyd, Sean Reed. But here's why faith leaders end up in the conversation. We end up in the conversation because of Jalen Roberts. We end up in a conversation because of Jalen Johnson. Here's why. Jalen Roberts and Jalen Johnson were murdered in our city. And when it was time to comfort that family, when it was time to speak out against the violence, when I showed up at that apartment complex, that day that we coordinated the prayer vigil, there were 20 people. Are you following? When we showed up after Jalen Johnson had been shot, a 17-year-old been shot 16 times, and we showed up with that mother and that grandmother to pray with them and to love on that family, there was nobody there but us. You follow? When we needed to put this other young man in the ground who had overdosed on Percocet, who had a family who he left behind, and somebody needed to make sure they had a decent Thanksgiving, a decent Christmas because daddy's now gone. I'm just saying, this is why we end up ushered into those conversations, because in between the Sean Reeds and the George Floyds and the, just you name them, in between those, there's other things that happen. And when they happen, folk like me show up and we look around and we go, where's everybody at? And so this is not a disparage. I'm not being disparaging. I'm just saying that it would be nice from our perspective if people would value every situation and not wait until it's something that ignites them from that particular angle or situation. I don't know how else to say that. I just know that when we show up, we're often by ourselves. The numbers are very low. When we stand in front of the city county building and we pray at the city county building and we demand meetings with the mayor and we demand meetings with the governor and we demand meetings with the IMPD, honestly, there's just not a lot of people there. So I'm just, I'm not trying to excuse, I'm just saying this is the reality that we run into.
I think it goes back to relationship, and also I've seen it different in different cities. Like in Indianapolis, I know if there was a meeting, you in particular wanted as just you were a faith leader, you would get honored at that meeting probably a lot sooner than other folks.
Not really, but okay, I get you.
But they know how to reach you when they need to, and they do so.
Yeah.
Here, there are a select few faith leaders who are the go-to by our administration because they're going to plug in the way that administration wants. And those are not necessarily the faith leaders that you talk about that are always showing up in the community that we know and many of us have relationship with. So it goes back to that too. The people that are in those places don't always reach out to the people in the community because it doesn't follow certain guidelines. It doesn't, they don't plug in the way they want, and they don't want anything different.
So how do we fix that?
We try. So there's a group called MICA, and it's an interfaith coalition of, I think there's at least 50 different faith affiliations, if not more. And, they put together policy considerations. They have task force. It is headed by a very well-known faith leader. And in recent events, that group of faith leaders has gotten ignored. And they have gotten ignored in place of other faith leaders who have supported our city mayor's policies. They donate heavily to his campaigns. They host prayer breakfasts. They are, his friends, his co-anchors. And faith leaders that don't follow that paradigm are ones that get ignored, but those are also the ones most plugged into the community. And so there's a disconnect. So when faith leaders that don't follow that paradigm try to plug in, doesn't want to hear it. As a group, doesn't want to hear it. And so there are people that are requesting and demanding these meetings that don't get them simply because our current administration knows we know what's up, and we're not just going to take crumbs that you're handing us. We want the pie. If you're not going to give us the whole pie now, we want several slices, and we don't want to nibble at crumbs in the process because we've tried this for so long.
So basically what I'm hearing you say is, and I agree with it, that we need to find ways to activate, or to make it clear that we are activating the troops from the rooter to the tutor, whether that is people in the street, whether that's people in the church, which the church people should be in the streets, but that's another conversation. People in the streets, people in the church, people at the state house, people in the city county buildings, people in, with the whoever. We need to be able to activate on every level so that all voices are included in the conversation and stop allowing even faith leaders to play politics with people's lives.
Yes, absolutely, because we've had protests or marches here every single day, and not once have those I've been a part of or have had colleagues that, not once have I seen any. Well, I've seen one elected official. And it's the commissioner, and she always shows up. Let me say that. Beyond her, zero. Until our local NAACP chapter hosts a press conference. It was paired with a popular church holding a march. I saw 3, 4, 5 elected officials. Well, where were they when the people were putting together the marches? Where were those pastors? And because there were several other faith leaders that participated. And even then, the numbers weren't large. They weren't nearly as large as the ones that have been happening with people all across the community. And so, where are they? We reach out, they don't answer. And then they get mad if we go over their head. Well, let's start answering some phone calls. Let's start responding to some emails and text messages. Because it cannot continue in this way. And I know it gets real tricky when I see, a pastor standing next to the mayor, and I know that they have access to a big church and lots of people, but then I see 2 of his sons at a protest. But I've never seen that pastor at a protest. It's, there's a connection there. There are several. Why aren't the pastors doing that with the community? Why are they allowing their affiliations with administration that they know is completely detached get in the way of being a part of this movement in improving, Black lives across the board? Those are questions and conversations that we need to really start having.
And I agree. These are conversations we need to have. Now, and again, I'm going to push back because, now, y'all know, you probably know, I took my daughter with me. And we went downtown to just kind of survey what was going on. So, yeah, I did go. Okay, I get you. And she did go with me, and I get that. But there are times where, like my daughter and my sons went to a protest in Bloomington. And I wonder if there had been someone who was in Bloomington who looked at my daughter and said, well, where's your dad? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And why isn't he here? Why are you here and your dad's not here? So I want to be, clear about that too. That gets back to the question of, well, when I'm out fighting for a situation and I'm saying, well, where are y'all? I think we do need to come to a place where we can recognize that I'm at home writing a script for a video that may help to clarify for the masses what we're really dealing with. And that's the role I play, because that's the lane that I'm in, and that's where my resources are best utilized in this season, as well as, like, I know someone right now, matter of fact, she's in excruciating pain right now, but I can guarantee you she's watching this. I'm not going to mention her name, but she knows exactly who she is. She can't get up. She cannot march. She's laying on her back because that's the only way she finds solace. But I guarantee you, Theryn, she knows you, and you don't even know that she knows you, but she knows you. She's here in Indianapolis, and she's praying for you because that's all she can do. You know what I mean? And I think that the sooner we get to that place where we can communicate with each other about what we can do from where we are, from the station that we are in, and say, you know what, I value what you bring to the table. It's not what I bring to the table, but in the midst of what we're going through, you are doing something, and I value what you're doing. I value when I see you, Theryn, and I see you out now, I'm gonna get with you though, because you ain't got your mask on while you're screaming and hollering. I need to look this way because be like, Theryn, I'm mad, because you've had to come through a lot to do what you do. But the reality is that I have to respect what you're doing, right? Because I've poured into you. And then you go be better than me. You go do things that I can't do. You go represent in places that I can't go. And I feel like only until we get to that place where I can release you without, this is not the right word, but without challenging you, but to release you and trusting that you have everything you need to go fight in the lane that you're in. Where we get.
And I think we have to stop judging people from whatever they're playing. Like, we know what different people represent, and as long as it is something honest, if they say, you know, I want to come connect, okay, so this is what we're doing. I think we have to be able to plug in without trying to judge or change something that makes sense. It's different if it doesn't make sense. But if it makes sense and somebody says, hey, well, you know, why don't we march to this place and then, you know, have a press conference, request a meeting, put a timeline on it. When it doesn't happen, these are next steps. Like, let's put something in order. That makes sense.
Right.
But oftentimes when people plug in, they go, well, that's stupid just to do that.
Right.
Well, let's talk about why you think it's stupid. Let's talk about what's worked before, what hasn't worked before, and how we can compromise or make it make sense for everybody. Because the same way is, let's say I haven't been, besides yesterday, which was a smaller action or protest, some of the mass protests, has been a couple of days since I've been, right? And so somebody may look at, well, people who know me know better, but somebody that has only been paying attention to what's in the news may say, well, oh, well, she's done, she's tired. Well, yes, I'm tired. No, I'm not done. You know, I've been on the phone with formerly elected officials and some current elected officials because I'm working on policy too. So I'm going to be out here, I'm going to protest with you, but I'm working on a policy initiative that makes sense, that is likely going to get a lot of support from people in this city. It's probably going to be anywhere between a year to 2 year process, just in time for when we need it enacted. That takes work. And I'm going to go vote. I'm constantly encouraging people to vote. So I'm going to do it all. I'm going to do everything I'm telling people to do. I'm going to come protest with you, but I'm also going to change some policy. And I've already changed some policy in this city before, on a corporate level. And then I'm also going to talk to you about voting.
Yeah.
And what that means to vote and being registered to vote and why people become apathetic about voting and what each office does.
Yeah.
It has to all come together, because now what happens is every election cycle, somebody calls me on election day. Where do I vote?
Mm-hmm.
Do I want to be like, why don't you know this already? Absolutely. But am I still going to look up they polling place?
Right.
You doggone right I am, because I still need them to go. At
Right.
least they are reaching out, and so they're taking some step in the right direction. And we've got to acknowledge the steps that people are taking, at least to get there. And then the people that just aren't to be bothered, then, you know, that's separate conversations. But right now we got to have active conversations with people that are at least making an honest attempt to be involved and make some things happen.
One of the things that the chair of our legal redress committee for the NAACP here in Indianapolis, we just interviewed him a minute ago, and one of the things that he shared was that you know, in this process, it's important to have immediate, short-term, mid-term, and long-range goals, and to take, because you know, I'm inviting everybody to go to our website, uniteforchange.org. Go to that website and then click on the link to the progress page. The progress page is where we have compiled the agendas and demands of multiple organizations throughout the city of Indianapolis, and it also includes some of things like 8 Can't Wait, right? So if you're not familiar with that, go to the page and you'll read it and you'll understand what that is. Now, the other thing is to recognize we have 64 demands, or 60 more agenda items or demands, depending on how you look at it. And some of them are overlapping, some of them are gaps. And the reality is that again, when we're moving from the moment of protest and the moment of marches to a movement that is sustainable, we have to begin to look at all of those things and do as Theryn has said. You know, we need some ground rules. And ground rule number one is that everyone's opinion, everyone's idea has value. It may not be something that is immediate. It may not be something that's short, mid, it may be long range, because in order for us to see movement, we have to recognize that the climate may be more conducive to guidelines right now. It may be conducive to legislation later. It may be conducive to rules or whatever midterm. And so until we get in a room or get into a conversation where we can rank and file or itemize or organize our thoughts, sometimes people need to understand it's not that the idea is a bad idea or the demand is a bad demand. This may just be a bad time for a good demand, if that makes sense. And so we need to have those conversations. And so I agree. It's never a situation where it's like, oh, that's a bad idea. Well, maybe it's a bad time, but it's a good idea. And we need to put it into the mix as such, as opposed to looking at stuff and walking into a meeting and saying, oh man, why are we doing that? That's horrible. Because all that's going to do is just turn people off, again, put us right back where we were. Folks aren't agreeing, folks are, doing the things that we historically do. And we don't have time for that. And I know millennials, y'all ain't got time for it.
Yeah, because some things that take a little, policy doesn't have to take long depending on which level it's at, but the idea has to be created. Then the document has to be drafted, approved. You have to have an attorney look over it. Like that could take a couple of days, a couple of weeks. So even when we're looking at some things on the local level, there are still a couple of days to weeks with which that could take. But something like saying, when our local law enforcement shows up to protest, they don't show up in riot gear. That's something that they can do immediately.
Correct.
They can leave, that riot gear in the back of the trunk or not even bring it at all. But that's not something that we've seen so far that they're willing to do. They cannot launch tear gas at protesters. That's something immediate that they can do starting right now. And so we have to have people that are willing to dissect this and think all the way through what's something that right now that we can ask and it be done immediately, what's something that may take weeks, months, and possibly even years, and what does that look like with who's in office currently being able to make those things happen. But all of those pieces have to work together, and sometimes people get siloed that's just the chant leader. Well, when you losing your voice and you've been yelling, 7 days a week, that person is pretty valued right now. That chant leader is needed the same way as the person who's going to sit at home that's an attorney. And so if you need to get bailed out of jail and you call them, they're going to hop up. They are just as valued. All of these people hold value in different ways, and it all has to come together for us to make some things happen. Here's the other problem, though. People want candidates that they're going to get excited about. And so while this looks a lot of different ways on the local level, it's a really big problem on the federal level for our presidential race. And there are people who are not happy with 45, but they don't like the presumptive Democratic nominee. And a lot of them want to sit at home. And some of our more senior generation wants to call the younger generation or anybody that doesn't want to vote, stupid, lazy, ignorant, all these other labels because they don't care for 45, but they don't like the presumptive nominee, so they will sit at home. That's not the route we need to take either. While it is critical for folks to vote in all elections right now, that's ideal. And what we need is people to vote, and that includes down ballot races. And so, if you're a person that's saying, you don't care for any of the presidential choices, okay, I hear you and I see you and I feel you. But can I get you to vote for a school board member? Can I get you to vote for a state house member? Can I get you to vote for a state senator? Locally we have state executive committee folks. Can I get you to vote for your mayor, your council person, your commissioner, your alderman? Can I get you to vote for something that is going to impact you just as much, if not more? Go vote for somebody. I've been asked if people can skip races. It's not ideal, but it's possible. And it means more to me to get somebody out to go to the polls and cast a ballot for somebody somewhere, even if it's not the entire ticket. Why? Because it is a step in the right direction. And then we can get them to understand how these components work together, so that when the next election comes, they know, okay, well, I don't like this, and I don't like that. This person supports this platform, so let me vote for them and continue to hold them accountable. And then also, people need to understand, because I share, I like or don't like, does not eliminate me from holding them accountable simply because they are the only option. If anything, we should hold them more accountable because they know they are the only option. So they owe it to us to provide us with discussions and answers and agendas that will serve us.
Mm-hmm. And so, to your point, we're going to bring this interview to a close because we now have the candidate running for governor of the state of Indiana, who is in the green room. They are ready to come on. And so we're going to go ahead and pause this one. I love this conversation because I love Theryn, and Theryn knows that I love her. And so this is one of my baby girls, and I appreciate her. I'm gonna always challenge her though, especially when she out and she ain't got on her mask. Theryn, you ain't got on your mask, okay? You can protest. We got to be protesting, and we got to be safe too, because we didn't talk at all about the impact of COVID-19 on what it is that we're dealing with right now. We didn't talk about that at all, and because I know my house, we voted absentee, and we even had a president who said that, you know, because we did that, that somehow is going to create, what did he say? That
voter fraud.
Yeah, voter fraud from absentee ballots or whatever. So, you know, what is that going to do to the GOTV come November with COVID and all that? We didn't even talk about that, but maybe we can talk about that a little later. I want y'all to give Theryn a hand, and we want to, you know what? I think I can give her a hand by myself. Let me just give her a hand. Give Theryn a hand. Theryn, I thank you for pinch hitting today, because we needed to have this conversation anyway. But as we were waiting on the candidate for governor to come on, I just reached out, and I reached out to Detroit, I reached out to DC, and I reached out to Memphis, and Memphis responded. And so thank you for doing that. Y'all do, again, remember, this is Theryn Bond. She is a community activist down there in Memphis, Tennessee. She's one of my former students from Tennessee State University there in Nashville, Tennessee. She is, you know, just doing wonderful and great things. She's not just doing it from a position of power. She's doing it in a position of service. You know, I know Theryn very well, and I know that this is not about gaining power. This is about doing the right thing for her community. She has access to so many people with the DNA of community leadership and servant leadership in her veins. It's running through her veins, literally running through her veins. And so we expect great things from you, Theryn. We do. Great things from you. Okay? All right? And we want, and then also, we want to see you at the Urban Servant Leadership Unconference. We got a stage for you to talk about. I think you're going to talk about something about the hashtag. What was that?
Movements beyond the hashtag.
Okay, so you're going to be talking about that at the Urban Servant Leadership Unconference. I see Sister Evelyn Blunt. She just dropped in on the chat box. Thank you, Sister Evelyn, for putting that out there. Thank you, Sister Faith McKinney, for putting out the website address. Y'all go there and register for the conference, because you're going to hear voices from all over the country about ideas and creativity and innovative things that everyone is doing around this country to keep the conversation going. Keep the movement alive, right? We don't want a moment. We want a movement. But in order to do that, we got to talk to each other. We got to get past all these ideological differences. We got to get past all these other generational differences and begin to have constructive conversation. And Theryn is going to be part of that. Okay, Theryn?
Yes.
All right, I got a commitment from you?
Yes.
All right, she's going to be a part of that conversation. All right, I'm going to put us on a 5-minute break, and then I'm going to get Dr. Woody Myers into the conversation. Again, we thank Theryn for dropping in. Y'all stick and stay close. Y'all share this. Go into your chat box, your messages, and share it. Do whatever you got to do, because Dr. Myers is going to be on. I'm going to try to get him on at the top of the hour. but we're going to get him in here as soon as we can. Okay, y'all? God bless. See you later, Theryn.
Bye. Thank you.
Peace. ultimate goal of the Urban Servant Leadership Unconference, we want to be able to bring together as many pieces of the puzzle as we can so that ultimately we put together a picture that helps us see and to understand what a valuable, sustainable community needs to look like.
I'm here because my personal life mission is to help others help themselves. It's the epitome of what servant leadership is all about.
So I wanted to come to the Unconference today so that I could discuss the Healthy Indiana Plan, which is a healthcare plan that's available to folks between the ages of 19 and 64 who have incomes at less than 138% of the federal poverty level.
My name is Anita Adams. I work with Indianapolis Healthy Star. We know that there are inequalities that are happening in our community, and we work to reduce those for families.
You have to be called to be a servant leader because you know that you are going to give and you may not get anything in return, and that's okay. An urban servant leader is called to do what we do.
You should really research it. If you were not here, I urge you, I cannot say this enough, that you need to come to the next conference.
All right, what's up, everybody? This is Pastor G with Community Conversations. I want to welcome you to another iteration of today's marathon, where we are dealing with, some of y'all have already seen this, we are dealing with our way forward, navigating the new normal. Today we're going to be talking about, and we have been talking to various faith leaders and community leaders, urban servant leaders, about everything from what's going on in our community with regard to the marches and the protests. But we also need to talk a little bit about this COVID-19 piece, right? We need to talk about how we are emerging as a city and as a state, how we are emerging from this, especially when we consider that communities of color are harder hit due to this pandemic than anyone else. And so I want y'all to know I am so thankful today to have with us the Honorable Dr. Woody Myers is in the house. Dr. Myers, thank you for joining with us today. God bless you. Tell the folk a little bit about who you are, and I really want you to lean into the fact that you are a candidate running for governor, and the fact that you lean into a little bit of the fact that you are, I believe, the first African American to run for that office in the state, if I'm not mistaken. Talk to us. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity, Pastor. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. Yes, I am the first African American candidate for governor for the state of Indiana. And part of my responsibility is to make sure I'm not the last. That we can utilize all the resources that are available today to mount a campaign that's going to get the Myers-Lawson ticket into the State House this coming fall, and then to make sure that we open the door for others as they come through. That's one of the main reasons that I'm running, is that we need young people to take an interest in all aspects of improving services, improving the life of our people throughout this state. And I just know that by becoming governor, I can make that happen both through the use of the bully pulpit, the budget of the state of Indiana, the changes of policies for the state of Indiana, and all the other tools that the governor has in order to make the state, help the state to move forward.
Now, we just got off of an interview with a young lady from Memphis, Tennessee, Theryn Bond. Theryn Bond is from the Julian Bond family. So she has, as I've said, she's got a lot of this community activism, this all of this, fighting for justice, fighting against injustice and equity, fighting for equity. She's got that running through her veins. And one of the things that she mentioned as a millennial is that progress doesn't just happen in the streets, that there has to be more than agitation, that there must be legislation, that there must be activism at the voting booth. And so, if you don't mind, from your vantage point, what are we up against come November? How important is this election? Not just how important is your candidacy. How important is this election to communities of color, throughout this city, state, and this country?
Well, it's simply life or death. That's how important it is. You talked a little bit earlier about COVID-19. COVID-19 is just the latest example of disparities that we have in the African American community versus other communities. COVID-19 attacks African Americans at a much higher rate. COVID-19 kills African Americans at a higher rate. COVID-19, though, isn't different in that respect from diabetes, from hypertension, from stroke, from obesity, from all the other concerns that we find with health in our community. It's just the latest, and it's deadly, and it's something that is hurting us disproportionately to others. And it just points out once again in Indiana the weakness we have in our healthcare infrastructure, our public health infrastructure. We've got to change the way we prioritize what we do with respect to our dollars, what we do with respect to our policies, and the people that we put in place to lead. One of the main functions of a governor is to appoint all of the leaders of state agencies that control where the dollars are going and how they are being utilized. I will be appointing, along with my lieutenant governor, people who care about the issues, people who want to move us forward, people who understand these disparities, and people who will take into account the troubles that our state has had over many, many years and fix them. I mean, I'm very pleased to see Reverend Girton, Pastor Girton, the energy of the millennials. You talked about them earlier with respect to the changes that are surrounding us today. I remember being a millennial back in the days when we didn't call it millennials, and I had some of that youthful energy as well. But I want to tell those young people that what you're seeing with respect to George Floyd and all of the others isn't new. We've had that for decades, for centuries. What's new is putting it on the television every night because of cell phone videos. What's new is the activism that has been now shared across communities, bringing the protests together to make the voices heard in a way that's been sustained now for 3+ weeks. And what's new, I think, is the beginning of a response that we need to continue to encourage nationwide and here in Indiana. If I could just point to one example, if you had told me a month ago that as a result of George Floyd's death, that NASCAR would get rid of the Confederate flag and ban it from all future races, I don't think I would have believed you. Though that's just one example. Let's hope it's real. Let's hope it's not just NASCAR, that it's going through all the institutions we have in our country, and let's hope that it's sincere. And we've got to do everything we can to make it to hold these entities accountable and to make this movement to sustain this movement over time.
I agree with you totally. I apologize. We had a technical glitch that went down, but we're going to keep it moving. Can you still hear me?
I can.
All right, wonderful. We're going to keep it moving. Now, now you talked about this. You are the former Indiana State Health Commissioner, right? And yeah, and so you mentioned the whole idea